There was a time when a red spoon on the cover of a cookbook meant dinner was already decided. In kitchens across America, Betty Crocker wasn't just a name, she was a trusted voice guiding families through weeknight meals, holiday feasts, and church potlucks. Some of those recipes became legends. Others quietly faded, tucked away in yellowing pages and forgotten card boxes. Today, we're reopening that cookbook and stepping back into the flavors that once filled American homes with comfort and pride. These are the Betty Crocker recipes that disappeared from our tables, but never from memory. Tunnel of fudge cake. In 1966, something extraordinary happened in an American kitchen. A chocolate cake so rich, so mysterious, that it changed baking history forever. The tunnel of fudge cake wasn't just dessert, it was an event. When Ella Helfrich entered it into the Pillsbury Bake-Off that year, no one expected it to become a national obsession. But once home bakers sliced into that dense chocolate bundt and saw the soft, molten-like center hidden inside, the country was captivated. What made it special wasn't frosting or decoration. It was what lived beneath the surface. Unlike modern lava cakes, this wasn't meant to spill dramatically onto a plate. The magic was subtle, a thick, fudgy tunnel running through the middle, achieved by carefully balancing boxed cake mix with chopped nuts and powdered sugar. It relied on precise baking time and the popularity of the bundt pan, which had just become a household staple in the 1960s. Soon, grocery stores struggled to keep certain cake mixes in stock. Families brought tunnel of fudge cake to potlucks, holiday gatherings, and Sunday dinners. It felt elegant but approachable, impressive without being complicated. For many women of that era, it symbolized pride in presentation and the excitement of mid-century convenience cooking. But as baking trends shifted toward lighter textures and flashier desserts, this dense chocolate masterpiece quietly faded. The original recipe even had to be reformulated when ingredient formulas changed, making the true vintage version harder to recreate. Yet for those who remember that first slice, the slightly cracked top, the rich aroma, the surprise hidden inside, tunnel of fudge cake was more than a recipe. It was a moment in time when a simple mix and a bundt pan created magic in the American kitchen. Tomato aspic mold. Before salads came in plastic tubs and were labeled fresh, there was a time when elegance meant gelatin. And few dishes captured mid-century sophistication quite like tomato aspic mold. Open a 1950s Betty Crocker cookbook, and you'd find it proudly displayed, vibrant red, perfectly shaped, and served chilled on a bed of crisp lettuce. Tomato aspic wasn't meant to be sweet. It was savory, bold, and surprisingly refined. Made with tomato juice, gelatin, vinegar, and carefully selected spices, it often included finely chopped celery, onions, or even green peppers suspended like tiny jewels inside. Once poured into decorative molds and left to set, it emerged as a shimmering centerpiece for luncheons, bridge clubs, and church gatherings. In an era fascinated by presentation, molded salads symbolized modernity. Refrigerators were becoming standard in American homes, and gelatin-based dishes felt innovative. They showcased a homemaker's precision. Unmolding the aspic without cracks required patience and confidence. When sliced, each piece held its shape perfectly, offering a tangy, herb-kissed flavor that paired beautifully with roast meats or seafood. But tastes evolved. As decades passed, the glossy red mold began to look more puzzling than appetizing to younger generations. The rise of fresh greens and oil-based dressings pushed aspic to the back of the refrigerator. What once signaled refinement slowly became a punchline of retro cooking. Still, for those who grew up seeing that ruby-colored ring at holiday tables, tomato aspic mold represents something deeper than gelatin. It reflects a time when creativity met convenience, when presentation mattered just as much as flavor. And though it may no longer dominate dinner tables, its place in culinary history remains firmly set, just like the dish itself once was. Chicken a la king. There was a time when seeing the words a la king printed in a cookbook felt almost luxurious. Chicken a la king wasn't just dinner, It was sophistication served over toast points. In the 1940s, 50s, and well into the 60s, Betty Crocker helped bring this creamy, comforting dish into everyday American homes. At its heart, chicken a la king was simple: tender diced chicken folded into a velvety sauce of butter, flour, and milk or cream. But what made it memorable were the additions: sweet green peas, diced pimentos, and sautéed mushrooms that gave color and depth. Served piping hot over toast, rice, or flaky biscuits, it felt hearty yet refined. It was the kind of meal you'd prepare when guests were coming, even if those guests were just neighbors stopping by for supper. In an era when convenience foods were rising, this dish bridged old-fashioned cooking with modern ease. Leftover roast chicken could be transformed into something elegant. Canned vegetables made preparation faster. It reflected a generation that valued thrift, presentation, and warmth at the table. But as tastes shifted towards spicier cuisines and lighter fare, cream-based classics like chicken a la king began to feel heavy and predictable. Restaurant menus changed. Home cooks experimented with international flavors. Slowly, the once celebrated dish was pushed aside. Yet for many families, its memory lingers. The steam rising from a ladleful poured over crisp toast. The comfort of a creamy bite on a cold evening. Chicken a la king represents a time when dinner was about stretching ingredients with care and serving something that felt a little special, even on an ordinary night. Impossible cheeseburger pie. In the 1970s, dinner didn't need layers of effort to feel complete. It needed to be clever. And few dishes captured that clever convenience better than impossible cheeseburger pie. When Betty Crocker introduced this recipe using baking mix, it felt almost magical. You poured everything into one pie plate, slid it into the oven, and somehow it formed its own crust while baking. No rolling pin. No separate dough. Just dinner solved. The filling was comfort in its purest form: seasoned ground beef, sautéed onions, eggs, milk, shredded cheddar. But the real wonder was the batter made with baking mix that rose and settled into layers, creating a soft bottom crust and lightly golden top. Families sliced into it like a savory pie, steam rising, cheese stretching gently with each serving. This was the height of practical cooking. More women were working outside the home, schedules were tighter, and recipes that promised fewer dishes and faster preparation felt revolutionary. Impossible cheeseburger pie delivered the familiar flavors of a backyard burger without firing up a grill. It was hearty, affordable, and dependable. For years, it appeared at weeknight dinners, potlucks, and community suppers. Children loved its cheeseburger taste. Parents loved its simplicity. It became one of those quiet staples that didn't demand attention but always satisfied. But as low-carb trends emerged and homemade from-scratch cooking regained popularity, baking mix shortcuts lost some of their shine. The word impossible began to sound more kitschy than impressive. Gradually, the pie slipped out of regular rotation. Still, for those who remember that first forkful, savory beef, melted cheese, and that soft golden crust, it represents a time when innovation meant making life easier, not fancier. And sometimes, that kind of magic is worth rediscovering. Ham and banana hollandaise. There was a moment in mid-century America when no flavor combination felt too unusual to try, especially if it was wrapped in elegance. Ham and banana hollandaise was one of those daring creations that only a 1950s dinner table could fully embrace. It sounded sophisticated, even continental. And in its time, it was considered perfectly modern. The dish was simple, yet unexpected. Firm bananas were wrapped in slices of baked ham, arranged neatly in a casserole dish, then covered in a warm, buttery hollandaise sauce. Sometimes a sprinkle of paprika or a handful of shredded cheese finished the top before a brief trip to the oven. The result was sweet, salty, creamy, and rich all at once. To modern tastes, the pairing may seem puzzling. But during that era, tropical ingredients like bananas symbolized abundance and global influence. Canned ham was convenient and widely available. Hollandaise sauce, whether made from scratch or with a mix, added a touch of refinement. Together, they reflected a generation eager to experiment and impress guests with something conversation-worthy. This wasn't everyday fare. It appeared at luncheons, ladies' gatherings, and holiday spreads where presentation mattered just as much as flavor. Served alongside molded salads or buttered vegetables, it represented a playful confidence in the kitchen. Over time, American palates shifted toward clearer flavor boundaries. Savory and sweet combinations became more intentional, less surprising. Ham and banana hollandaise slowly became one of those recipes people remembered with raised eyebrows and faint laughter. Yet it tells an important story about its era, an adventurous spirit, a fascination with convenience, and a belief that the dinner table was a place for creativity. Whether loved or questioned today, it remains a bold reminder of how fearless mid-century cooking could be. Hot dog pie. Long before gourmet toppings and artisan buns transformed the humble hot dog, there was a time when it found its way into something far more unexpected: a pie. Hot dog pie was the kind of recipe that felt playful, practical, and perfectly suited to the busy kitchens of the 1950s and 60s. It took a backyard favorite and brought it indoors, turning it into a fork-and-knife family supper. The concept was simple but clever. Sliced hot dogs were layered into a baking dish, often mixed with baked beans, onions, or a bit of mustard for that familiar tang. Over the top went a biscuit or cornmeal batter, sometimes enriched with cheese. As it baked, the topping rose and browned, sealing in the savory filling beneath. When served, each scoop revealed smoky hot dog pieces tucked inside a soft, golden crust. For families watching their budgets, this dish made sense. Hot dogs were affordable, filling, and loved by children. Turning them into a casserole-style pie stretched ingredients further and made the meal feel complete. It was comfort food without ceremony, easy to assemble, dependable, and warmly satisfying. In an era when convenience foods were celebrated, recipes like this symbolized ingenuity. They reflected a belief that everyday ingredients could become something new with just a little imagination. Weeknight dinners didn't need to be complicated, they just needed to gather everyone around the table. As tastes evolved and casseroles lost their spotlight, hot dog pie quietly disappeared from most cookbooks. Today it may sound unusual, even nostalgic to the point of curiosity. But for many, it recalls evenings filled with simple laughter, clinking plates, and the reassuring knowledge that dinner was hot, hearty, and waiting. Raisin pie. Raisin pie might seem modest by today's standards, but in the 1940s and 50s, it was a showstopper in home kitchens. Far from being a dessert of last resort, it reflected the era's ingenuity, transforming pantry staples into something comforting, sweet, and deeply satisfying. Raisins, sugar, a splash of lemon juice, and a hint of spice came together under a flaky pastry to create a pie that smelled like home the moment it emerged from the oven. What made raisin pie special was its texture and flavor layering. The raisins plumped during baking, absorbing sugar and butter, while the pastry offered a crisp contrast. Cinnamon or nutmeg added warmth, and a touch of vanilla brought everything together. Some families even added chopped nuts or a little rum extract to make the filling richer, giving the humble pie a subtle sophistication that often surprised guests. This dessert was perfect for seasonal gatherings or Sunday dinners when time and care could be devoted to a lovingly baked treat. It was economical, using ingredients that were often on hand, yet it carried a sense of pride. There was a ritual to making it: washing and soaking the raisins, stirring the filling slowly, carefully lining the pie pan. Every step mattered. Over time, raisin pie became a rarity. Modern desserts lean toward chocolate, custard, or fruit tarts with bolder flavors, leaving raisin-filled classics in fading cookbooks. Yet for those who remember it, raisin pie evokes a sense of nostalgia, warm kitchens, family laughter, and the simple joy of creating something sweet from ordinary ingredients. It's a quiet testament to the resourcefulness and charm of mid-century American baking. Beef stroganoff casserole. Before convenience casseroles became kitchen staples, beef stroganoff was a dish reserved for Sunday dinners or special occasions. By the 1960s, Betty Crocker helped adapt this Russian classic into a casserole that fit neatly into the mid-century American lifestyle, rich, comforting, and easy to prepare for busy families. The casserole version began with tender strips of beef, browned to lock in flavor. Sautéed onions and mushrooms joined the mix, creating a fragrant base. Then came the creamy sauce, a blend of sour cream, beef broth, and a touch of mustard, pouring over the meat to soak into every corner. Finally, egg noodles or rice were layered in or folded through, transforming a stovetop favorite into a complete, all-in-one baked meal. The oven's heat melded everything together, creating a slightly golden crust on top while keeping the filling lusciously creamy inside. What made beef stroganoff casserole beloved was its balance of comfort and sophistication. It had the familiar, homey appeal of beef and noodles, but the creamy sauce and layered presentation made it feel special enough for guests. Families could prepare it ahead of time, pop it in the oven, and serve a hearty, flavorful dinner without last-minute fuss. Yet as decades passed, tastes shifted. New international cuisines, lighter sauces, and quick skillet meals began to dominate home kitchens. Slow-baked casseroles with heavy cream fell out of fashion, replaced by modern convenience foods or fresh, simple preparations. Still, for those who remember a mid-century kitchen, beef stroganoff casserole is more than a dish. It evokes the warmth of family dinners, the aroma of mushrooms and butter wafting through the house, and the simple pleasure of gathering around the table for a meal that was both comforting and a little indulgent. It's a snapshot of an era when dinner was hearty, approachable, and reliably satisfying. Tuna noodle loaf. In the 1950s and 60s, weeknight dinners needed to be practical, filling, and appealing to the entire family, and few recipes captured that balance quite like tuna noodle loaf. On the surface, it might sound unusual today, but in its time, this baked dish was a clever solution to the challenges of busy kitchens. It took simple, inexpensive ingredients and turned them into a hearty, all-in-one meal that could feed a family and stretch leftovers further. The base was familiar: cooked egg noodles mixed with canned tuna, chopped onions, and a creamy binder of soup or mayonnaise. Eggs and a little seasoning helped hold it together as it baked, forming a firm yet tender loaf that sliced neatly onto plates. Some households added a sprinkle of grated cheese or crushed crackers on top, creating a golden, savory crust that hinted at the richness inside. The aroma of tuna and buttered noodles baking filled the kitchen, inviting family members to gather around the table. For mid-century homemakers, tuna noodle loaf offered more than convenience. It was economical, comforting, and a subtle showcase of creativity. Leftover vegetables or bits of cheese could be folded in, and the dish could be served hot with a simple side salad. Children often loved it because it combined familiar flavors in a fun, sliceable form. Over time, taste changed. Canned tuna fell out of fashion, and baked noodle loaves seemed heavy compared to lighter, fresher dinners. Yet those who remember it recall more than the flavor. They remember practicality, care, and the quiet satisfaction of serving a meal that was both filling and thoughtfully prepared. Tuna noodle loaf is a relic of a kitchen era where resourcefulness met comfort, and dinner was as much about family as it was about food. Pineapple upside-down cake. Few desserts capture the optimism and charm of mid-century America like the pineapple upside-down cake. In the 1950s and 60s, this cake wasn't just a sweet ending. It was a statement of style and resourcefulness. Vibrant rings of pineapple and cherries glazed in brown sugar adorned a golden cake, creating a visual and flavorful centerpiece for any gathering. The magic of the cake lay in its simplicity. A layer of butter and brown sugar was poured into the pan, followed by neatly arranged pineapple slices, sometimes topped with maraschino cherries for a pop of color. Then came the batter, poured gently over the fruit. During baking, the sugars caramelized, creating a glossy, sticky topping that, when inverted, revealed a stunning pattern that impressed every guest. It was as much about presentation as taste, a hallmark of 1950s homemaking. Beyond its visual appeal, the cake embodied the era's approach to convenience. Canned pineapple was widely available and affordable, while boxed cake mixes allowed even novice bakers to create something that looked professional. It was perfect for holidays, Sunday dinners, or a spontaneous midweek treat. Each slice offered a balance of sweet, tangy, and buttery textures, a comforting combination that lingered on the tongue and in memory. But as decades passed, dessert trends shifted toward lighter, less sugary options, and the pineapple upside-down cake gradually lost its place in home kitchens. Modern bakers favored elaborate frostings or fruit-topped sponge cakes, leaving this caramelized classic to nostalgic cookbooks and family memories. For those who remember it, pineapple upside-down cake is more than a retro dessert. It represents mid-century creativity, resourcefulness, and a time when a simple canned fruit could transform into a centerpiece that delighted both eyes and palate. Its legacy is sweet, sticky, and timeless, a final nod to the joy of home baking from an era long past. As we close this journey through forgotten Betty Crocker recipes, it's clear that these dishes were more than food. They were memories, family traditions, and a glimpse into mid-century American life. From molten chocolate tunnels to caramelized pineapple, each recipe carried a story, a flavor, and a moment in time that shaped kitchens and hearts alike. While many have faded from modern menus, revisiting them allows us to reconnect with the creativity, comfort, and warmth of generations past. Maybe it's time to bring some of these classics back, one nostalgic bite at a time.